I'll be actually presenting the findings from the formative evaluation that we did for Project Mesha. And this formative evaluation was carried out in 2016. So just for people who are new to formative research, or to let them know what exactly formative research tries to do, it is a research that is conducted just before the implementation of a program, because it helps in informing the implementation of the program or any component of the program that may not be acceptable to the community or to the people that it is being implemented for. And also it's feasibility of a particular intervention. So it basically helps in refining and improving the program activities of any particular intervention. And it's great, and it's important to do it, especially if an intervention engages community, or if it is focused on behavior change. So it helps in understanding the community, what the culture of the community, whether the intervention would be acceptable to them, or whether it will be feasible for them to be able to accept it, or to be able to see the sustainability, basically. So moving on quickly to touch on what actually the problem is, giving a brief context of Project Mesha. My fellow speakers talk about this in greater detail. So goats provide livelihood support to over 70% landless, marginal and small farm households in India. Goat rearing is characterized by its supplementary support role for the primary livelihoods. Goats are reared mostly by poor households, as my colleague already mentioned, and especially women are engaged in rearing goats for additional household income. In Muzzaffarpur in Bihar, where this particular program is being implemented, the mortality and morbidity of goats is extremely high, which affects the productivity of the goat flocks, which in turn adversely affects the livelihoods of the poor households for women. That is critical supplementary income. So in this context, Aga Khan Foundation conceptualized this community-based program called Project Mesha to develop the potential of goat farming, and is currently, as I said, it's currently being implemented in Muzzaffarpur. So its main objective is to transform and improve the quality of life of landless and marginal farming households in Bihar through improvements in small ruminants production. So it aims to achieve this by promoting better management practices and providing regular and timely access to medicines, deworming pills, vaccines, medical care, by identifying and training community health service providers, which are also called Pashu Sakhis, and they would be identified from self-help groups. Since women play an important role in goat rearing, Project Mesha is using the institutional platform of self-help groups, and they are established under Jivika, and through this it will be basically goat rearing will be strengthened and improved, and it will become basically a viable income for small and landless and marginal farming households. This will actually lead to decreased mortality and morbidity, and as I already mentioned, and thereby generating higher incomes, which is one of the main outcomes of Project Mesha, which will also lead to women's empowerment. This is again quickly to touch upon the theory of change and what were some of the major underlying assumptions that we were actually validating through this particular formative evaluation. And again, my fellow speakers, they'll talk in much greater detail what exactly the theory of change is and how it has evolved over a period of time. So some of the, so it's, as I mentioned earlier, that it will be using basically SHGs as a platform to strengthen and to train the women on better management practices and on also identify Pashu Sakhis to be able to deliver the services. And so one of the major assumption was that SHGs are present in the implementation areas and that they are functioning effectively over there. Also, another major assumption was that there's a possibility of developing a whole cadre of community health service providers from amongst the goat farmers in the area, and even though we know that women are engaged in goat rearing, but are they the ones who are actually taking economic decisions related to goats? So are they engaged in selling, or are they engaged in taking decisions related to goats' health? So do they go to the market to be able to purchase medicines when required for the goats? So these are some of the assumptions that we validated. And also, if there's actually demand for all these preventive healthcare services or management practices related to services among the goat farmers. So what did we actually, how did we actually test the feasibility? What were the main objectives of this particular study? It was to basically gain contextual knowledge. Some of the key questions that we were trying to answer through this study was, what are the goat farming practices? What is the contribution of goats to overall household income? Who are the key stakeholders and decision makers in the goat rearing and management practices? What is the marketing practices at the household level? And what are the existing healthcare systems for small ruminants in the area? As I mentioned in my previous slide, that we also validated some of the key assumptions, some of the major assumptions in the theory of change, and we also informed the program of output and outcome indicators. So we basically actually conducted focus group discussions with SHG members who were either goat rearers or not, and in-depth interviews with all the important stakeholders in the ecosystem of goat rearing. We actually conducted a stakeholder mapping while we were piloting our tools, and we could identify some of key stakeholders which were not informed to us in advance. So, for example, homeopath doctors were, I think we got to know while we were piloting that they are one of the key stakeholders. Many a times women just rush to them when their goats are sick, and we found out that the medicines prescribed by the homeopath doctors are basically very effective. So this is the range of stakeholders that we interviewed for data collection. We had household interviews, we interviewed health service providers, basically vets and quacks. We interviewed some of the health officials at the block and district level. We also interviewed butchers to understand the market system and the CBO leaders. We also interviewed some sector experts and community buck service providers. We also conducted focus group discussions in all the sample villages in the implementation area. And we found that, so one of the key findings was that women do play a major role not only in managing the goats and taking care of them, but also in economic decisions related to goats' health, purchase or sale of it. So it is the women who actually runs to the pharmacist or runs to the vets to be able to take care of their goats, to see that the goat is in the perfect condition, so that whenever there is a need to be able to sell the goat, they get the maximum price out of it. So most of the women who were there in the group discussions, they mentioned that they decide basically what to do with the money when they sell the goat. So ultimately, it is they who are the key decision makers. So that way we could validate one of our assumptions, if that the women hold the ultimate agency over the income and over the goats. Again, so one of the main research question was, what was the contribution of goats to overall household income? So goats play a significant role, and they're like financial insurances with very low investments. So goats are used for sale in times of need. They're exchanged for products and services. They are used in social life and, of course, personal consumption. So anytime a household is in dire need or is it could be for any reason, for critical illness, for shortage of food, goats are immediately sold off, and their needs are met. So they are much more easily liquidated. In fact, one of the respondents mentioned that it works much faster than an ATM. They are also used in social life. So, for example, there were a few households which mentioned that they are either gifted as dowry or they are fed for the guests who arrive at a wedding. So they are used for personal consumption and as well. One of the practices in Bihar that in Muzzaffarpur that we came to know of was posiya, which is basically a verbal agreement between two people. So posiya is something that suppose if I have a herd size of 4 to 5 and it's difficult to manage, I would give away to a poor farmer, and the borrower can basically rear the goat, and whenever the goat has a kid or two, that gets divided between the lender and the borrower. Also, the mother goat goes back to the lender. Yeah. So these are some of the characteristics of the small ruminants that were reported to us during the household interviews. So the average herd size of any so the average herd size was basically 4 to 5 goats per household. The mortality was about 1 to 2 per household, and sale of goats also was 1 to 2 per household. There was very low risk appetite among owners. So there was very low risk appetite among owners, and therefore they always sold the goat at a much lower rate in comparison to what if they would sell the goat at if the goat would have matured, or if the goat was being sold in times of festivals or in times of any other such events. Okay, so these are some of the, I'll now talk about some of the prevalent practices that were existing at that point in time. So we found that almost 50% of the respondents did not have a separate housing for goats. They were always either tied in one corner of the house, or they were either kept at a kacha ground, which is not actually good for goats, because always droppings or always pee of the goat would be there and it would stick to their foot, and because of which several diseases could be caused. However, in comparison to large ruminants, they would always have a shelter. It's very discriminatory behavior, actually. So yeah, I mean, the best practices were not followed by the women farmers with regards to housing. Similarly, with feeding, most of the women followed mixed form of feeding. It would be basically mixed. There'd be maize and husks would be mixed with water to be able to feed the goats, and during the times of harvesting, they would be left for grazing in open pastures, in common pastures. With regards to breeding, breeding practices again was very problematic. So the ideal age of Black Bengal, which is one of the predominant breed of in Muzzaffarpur in Bihar, is 9 months. However, most of the goats were found to be pregnant at 6 months of age. It is ideal to keep about 2 to 4 months of gap between two pregnancies, but it wouldn't be followed. Sometimes it was reported as low as 20 days. So, which is basically kind of fatalistic for the goats. Again, majority of the households adopted curative approach rather than preventive practices. So home remedies are first sought when the goat starts showing some primary symptoms of bloating or of diarrhea. The first step would be to go to household remedies rather than seek out an expert's opinion on what is happening to the goat. So these were some of the prevalent practices in Muzzaffarpur in Bihar at that point in time. Market practices, again, market linkages are very well defined. However, in most of the cases, chicks and butchers would come to the village to purchase the goat from the women. So that way, women did not have to go out anywhere, and the market would come to them. So it was much easier for them to be able to sell the goats. However, there were two downsides to it. One was that there was, of course, no standard weighing practice to it. And also, a women would not know what is the current or what is the prevalent best rate of that they could fetch from that particular goat. So what did the study inform? Again, I'll touch base on those 4 assumptions that I was talking in my previous slide. That was the SHGs functioning adequately enough to be able for smooth implementation of the project. So we found that in most of the cases, SHGs were functioning in a primitive fashion. In one of the villages, SHGs actually was just happening to form. So we were not sure that if an SHG is just forming or if it is not mature enough, how will this project be implemented? Also, in our household interviews, we realized that about 30% of our respondents who are goat farmers but not SHG members. How would they be included in the project Mesha? And demand for preventive healthcare management. There was high demand for preventive healthcare management because most of the women reported that just keep our goats disease-free and we are ready to pay whatever. So they were happy to receive healthcare services at their doorstep. However, there were concerns like what are the alternate payment options? Like would there be credit facility available, or would there be any other alternate payment option that would be available for the women? There was some concern regarding developing a cadre of community of small ruminants, basically Pashu Sakhis. I think we raised the concern of that because most of the women are illiterate, especially the older women are illiterate, and they being trained as Pashu Sakhi, basically the training module would have to be catered or would have to be altered in a way that they understand. And also, if the younger lot of women are being selected as Pashu Sakhis, their mobility would be little problematic in the rural area. Women's Empowerment Agency, I think I've already spoken on this, that how women do take a lot of economic decisions related to goats. So I think I'm almost done. So some of the key recommendations through this particular, sorry, I'll take a minute. So these are the few recommendations that we could give through the project to Project Mesha. So one was to generate awareness on animal disease and best practices of goat farming, while simultaneously focusing on the health services. I think I already spoke on this point that there's high demand for services of goat health workers. However, if they are willing to pay, the willingness to pay for these services was much lower, or they would ask for alternate payment options. Pricing and packaging of these services and training of Pashu Sakhis would require innovative approaches because of the reasons that I just mentioned. And some of the output and outcome indicators that we suggested was that recall periods of birth, mortality, sale and purchase should not be more than a year. I think in our interviews we were asking them to recall for over 2 years, and there were high chances of error. As I mentioned in the previous slide, that covering the main festivals is very important to be able to capture the varied prices for goats. And the last point, stillbirths, needs to be captured. I think we had to really probe a lot to be able to capture stillbirths. Most of the women wouldn't report stillbirths among goats. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. And on behalf of AKF, I would like to thanks 3i for providing this opportunity. Already Priyanka has shared a lot about this formative evaluation. So I would just brief about this progress of the project and how this project has been conceptualized and what are the constraints in the goat rearing sector and how the project is moving now. Yeah, this project is basically the Women Economic Empowerment Project through goat-based livelihood. So productivity and production enhancement in goat-based livelihood and engaging these women for their economic and social empowerment. This project is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the project is being implemented in Muzzaffarpur, and the scaling up will be done through this Jivika platform. If you look at this, 15% of goat population and 6% of sheep population in the world, India is one of the largest goat population country. And India is having around 135 million goats as per 2012 census. And it's a quarter of India's total livestock population. And Bihar has the third largest small ruminant state after Rajasthan and UP. And it is having around 12.15 million goats as per 2012 livestock census. And it's increasing by 19% between 2007 to 2012. If you look at this Black Bengal breed, it's a predominant breed of particularly in Bihar and adjacent states also in UP and other states, but in Bihar it's a predominant breed. There are some other constraints. If you look at this, women are more engaged in rearing of these goats. All the management is being done by the woman. But if you look at the higher value chain, you will find their role declines in a higher value chain activities. Similarly, it's we thought of in the project, while we were designing this project, we thought of if we increase the income in the hands of women, that will definitely increase the woman's role in the decision making in the household, and their role in society and acceptance in the society. As well, that will also impact in the quality of life of the whole household. Similarly, there is a SHG platform already developed and promoted by Jivika, and we thought of if this platform is being used for improved management practices, and that will impact in two parts. One is increase income in the hands of women, and that will improve agriculture productivity, as well women's empowerment. There are two arms where this will impact the whole process. Similarly, if you look at in Bihar, around 0.7 million SHGs has been promoted by Jivika, and that covers around 9 million household. And Jivika has planned to reach around 15 million household by 2022. So it's a big platform through which we can scale it up, the whole learnings of Project Mesha. And if you look at the ownership of goats increased day by day because the land is scarce in our villages. There are some constraints. If you see the goat rearing sector, there is a huge and adequate timely availability of preventive care services there is a huge gap in the preventive services in the rural areas. Similarly, you will find we have an assumption that 30 to 40% mortality is being seen, or it is found in the goat rearing sector. Third one is lack of good quality breeding bulk, and indiscriminate breeding is one of the reason we found that because of this good breeding bulk, lack of good breeding bulk, there is dwarf animals come in the villages, and there is a lots of disease also. So we thought of we can also intervene in this area. Similarly, there was no an existence of the institutional structure on goat-based livelihood. Although there is an SHGs, but the goat rearing sector has not been put together through an institution, and that definitely impact on integration of the whole value chain, and that will also impact on the income of the household. So that was one of the assumption and one of the constant we found. In spite of insignificant impact in the life of poor household, as Priyanka shared, around 70% contribution comes from this goat-based livelihood. But you will find neither the government or the private sector has put money or invested a lot to develop this whole sector. So this is one of the constant we found, and we will be surprised. This is the first and foremost project which is in a large scale. This is the 50,000 families. We are going to directly work with these 15,000 families, and we have planned to reach around 1 million household within Bihar. So this, in the whole country, this is the one and foremost project which is in large scale in goat rearing sector, and that can be we think and we are trying to make it a proven model that can be replicated in other states of India. There are three major outcomes in the project. One is increase income from small ruminant, 50,000 families by 50%. Similarly, the women empowerment, this is the other outcome. And third outcome is scale it up, the whole project learning in the Jivika area, Jivika districts in Bihar. Project Mesha theory of change, I will not explain more. We have basically focused on model of delivery and in a significant scale, sustainable model of delivery. Similarly, we are trying to use this existing SHG platform to develop these goat-based livelihood groups. And third one is women's income control over this productive asset, so that they can make their say within the community and within the household. And fourth one is we are trying to develop this, demonstrate the proven model that can be replicated in other district of Bihar. So these are the four major arms through this theory of change we will focus on. What are the approaches we have adopted during this whole project till now, 2.5 years? We have tried to decrease the mortality through preventive healthcare system like vaccination, regular deworming, improve biosecurity, feeding, housing, and green fodder. We have tried to improve the knowledge base of goat rearers through different kinds of training. We have the training modules that we have developed 13 training modules for goat rearers and 5 training modules for Pashu Sakhis. So through these training models, we are trying to develop their knowledge. Similarly, we are trying to develop a Pashu Sakhi cadre which can be closely work with the goat rearers. That will definitely reduce the mortality of the goats as well increase the income of the household. We have also focused on strengthening the vaccine and dewormer supply chain. We have a dialogue with Hister to provide vaccines and dewormer at block level so that the Pashu Sakhis can easily access these vendors and can get profit, and farmers can get the vaccines and dewormer on time. There are wide, you can say the widened basket of services like the castration, similarly the mineral mixture, feed block, improved bucks. These are the improved buck services. Through these Pashu Sakhis, these services are being provided to the community, and the community are paying for these services. So this is not a free of cost. The community is paying for each and every services to the Pashu Sakhis. Identifying good breeding buck, we are not doing this cross breeding in this area. We are just selecting some good breeding bucks within the herd size, and we are trying to give them to the Pashu Sakhis and some of the goat rearers who are willing to keep these bucks and to provide the buck services to the goat rearers. And definitely we are trying to facilitate access to more remunerative market through collective sale. And we will definitely promote this goat producer company, and we have already started. These goat rearer groups will come together and promote a goat producer company, and these companies will basically do the value chain and supply chain, both part. These companies will work. And the last one is, the community-based insurance, because these all goat rearers are very marginalized and they are not having sufficient land to grow different kinds of crops. So there should be some insurance which can save them while their goats die. So these are the assumptions in the project, and in the middle part you will see these findings of 3I, and these are the approaches we have focused on. Like we generate awareness through different models like wall painting, and similarly like video show, night show, different kinds of things we are trying to do in the ground. And the service fee is being decided by the community as well as the Pashu Sakhis both. That was the participatory model, as 3I has suggested also. Pashu Sakhi are earning up to 4,000 per month. You will see the from community services, and apart from the project contribution. Project is contributing 1,500 per month first year, and second year 750, and third year onward the Pashu Sakhi will earn themselves within the community whatever the skill they will have. Recall period, we have definitely followed what 3I has suggested, not more than 1 year. And in a training module we have put different kinds of games so that these Pashu Sakhis are not very qualified and well educated, so they can be able to understand what is going to deliver, and they can be easily engaged within the training period. So I will go through some project progress, what exactly we are doing. In 4 blocks of Muzzaffarpur, we are trying to implement the whole program, and we have already touched upon 6 districts of Jivika. And this year we have planned to reach 9 districts of Jivika in 2018. So these are the outreach we have done in 2018 till 2018. These are the numbers. You will see in right hand you will see the project target and what we have reached till now. Till now. So I will not explain more about it. Because these are the number, but in the next slide you will definitely enjoy I will bring you in the field through different photographs. You will find some energy, what exactly going on in the ground. So this is the Pashu Sakhi model. This is baby Kumari, and this is 1.5 year old in the project. And we have already promoted 148 Pashu Sakhis in the project area, and there is also a dropout, 17 dropout here. And we have done the orientation training, then the 4 phases training, 3 phases on goat health management, and 1 phase on women empowerment, and 1 phase still we have not done. In coming months we will give. So 5 phases training we are going to do with the Pashu Sakhis. There are some learning and challenges we found during selection of Pashu Sakhis and grooming of these Pashu Sakhis. Low education level of Pashu Sakhi hinders training program, like they are not able to understand what exactly, because some of the technical things we are trying to give during this training program. Discontinuation from training due to personal issues. They are also having different kinds of personal issues, because this is not a job. We are just trying to make them skilled enough to work in the field. Increased workload due to different project intervention and their household work, that makes reduce their leisure time. This is one of the reason and one of the issue we are trying to address of these Pashu Sakhis. And definitely that requires motivation, counseling and handholding support to Pashu Sakhis for a steady income from basically through castration. Castration is one of the activity through which they are earning a lot in the ground. Yeah. And definitely you will enjoy these photographs, like these are the Pashu Sakhis who are administering these deworming in the ground. And we have reached 73,000 doses of deworming in the ground in 4 blocks of Muzzaffarpur. And these are the household we have covered, around 27,000 household we have covered through deworming. And these are the vaccination protocol, and these Pashu Sakhis under the supervision of veterinary doctor, they are administering these vaccines like the PPR and ET vaccination. These are the numbers you can see in the slide. And what Priyanka has shared, there is if the goat is very sensitive enough while they are standing in a moisture place, and that they need some place where there can be stressless and that can grow enough and gain more weight. So this is the reason we have promoted different kinds of goat house, and you can see these are the beautiful model we have tried to do, and this model is going to adopt by government of Bihar, Jivika, through Manrega program that will be replicated in other district of Bihar. So considering the, you will also see the gender aspect. There is 2 feet height from the ground that the droppings can be easily cleaned by these women. So we have also tried to make it so conscious enough so that these women can be considered, they can enjoy to do these activities, and goats can grow easily and gain weight in a shorter span of time. Yeah, this is the ajola activity. This is the very interesting activity you will find. These households are not having sufficient land to grow green fodders. So the ajola is having around 25% protein, and a very small place you can grow this the green fodder. And 200 grams per day, 1 goat can be given with mixing with the dry fodder and some feeds, and the goat will grow enough in a shorter span of time. So this is the intervention we have made, and we have reached around 1,700 household. These are the feeders we have promoted, because while you are putting some grasses and feed in the ground, there is possibility of pathogens come in the goat, and there will some disease in the goat. So that's why we have promoted different kinds of the feeders, and these feeders are being used by these goat rearers. We have also promoted one of the activities, kitchen garden. Kitchen garden have 2 objectives. One is to provide nutrition to the woman, as well the residue of these of these vegetables can be used for goats. And within the plot, we have also promoted some green grasses like barsim and makhan grass. There are lots of grasses we have promoted in the kitchen garden area. This is the activity what Priyanka was saying, that the goats are being by these local buyers, the chicks. They are not basically weighing these goats. They are just taking these goats with an estimation. They are quoting the rate on estimation, that andaj se. In Hindi, this is andaj se. So we have just introduced this weighing machine. 116 weighing machines we have introduced, and we make the community realize that what is the weight of your goat, and how much you can ask to the buyer, and you can negotiate. So this is also a gender part. We are trying to make them negotiate with the buyers so that they can get the fair price and they can able to understand what price they can get from the buyer. Right? So this is the activity we have introduced in the ground. Similarly, you will find this castration. And castration is you will be surprised, while we are providing training to the Pashu Sakhis, they were putting their clothes in the eyes while we were talking about the you will pick up the testes and you will use this castrator and you will do this castration, and there are lots of things you will find while we are giving training. But these women Pashu Sakhis nowadays are doing castration without any hesitance, and in a month they are doing castration, 70 castration, 80 castration, and the charges are they receive 40 rupees per castration from the community. So this is the one of the sources of income. Yeah. And the scale up activity, we have given 54 the Jivika staff has 54 staff has received training. And in Jivika district, in 6 districts, we have given 161 Pashu Sakhis has been promoted, and first phase training has been received by 161 Pashu Sakhis, and 64 Pashu Sakhis has received second phase training also. And we have planned to implement the whole program in 9 districts in 2018. Although there are lots of things I will not explain because I have shortage of time. There are more 3 slides I will quickly run through. We have some monitoring and evaluation objectives, like we wanted to promote this robust MIS and monitoring and evaluation system, and a tab-based data input system so that we can get the real-time data from the community and from the field, and track impact and increase income within the community. And that can be the last one is we have also the different forums. Through these forums we wanted to share these learnings from the ground, what exactly going on in the ground. So what are the progress till now in monitoring and evaluation? Formative evaluation has been done by 3I, and the baseline has been done by POP Council. My colleague is here. And annual VIA survey ourselves done with 600 household, and goat disease mapping has been done by Bihar Veterinary College. The professors of Bihar Veterinary College team and went and did this disease mapping. Establish internal reporting system, monthly, quarterly, and 6 monthly, annually. And regular training assessment we are doing. In every training we do the pre and post training assessment so that we can understand how much these participant has learned. And Excel based MIS system we are right now doing, and web based mobile enabled microware is promoting this whole system, and possibly in next month we will launch this software. These are the milestones we have planned in 2018 and 19. Regular timely data collection through these MIS. And goat breed improvement, we have also bring 2 other partners, this Nimkar Agriculture Research Institute and Abacus Bios, the New Zealand based company. They will help us in breed improvement in the whole program. And we have also planned to conduct this goat market study so that we can promote these goat producer companies. Lean data survey is being done by Acumen Fund, and hopefully within 1 or 2 months we will get the report from them. Baseline survey of Jivika district, where we are implementing the whole program is scaling up. We will do this baseline. And Mesha MIS system to be followed with periodic assessment of different activities and so on. So this is all about the presentation.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge my senior colleague, Abhishek Hazra, who's a senior program officer here and has been working with us and the team to get this baseline evaluation and the findings out. So I'll just quickly give you the direction in which this presentation will go. We'll give you a quick context of what the baseline evaluation was, as well as the key findings. Then we'll tell you a little bit about the goat rearers, a little bit about the goats, and then the key outcome areas that have already been discussed and described, focusing around goat mortality and morbidity, the income from activities, as well as the empowerment of women. So everyone has talked about the theory of change, and I want to just put it up here for you all to see. This is the latest version or the latest iteration that the theory of change went in. So originally, you're not meant to focus on it, but originally the design was to look at increase in income of women, increase in their empowerment, as well as increase in the survival of the goats. And with the intention that this would expand and be taken up by Jivika. And the formative evaluation was very informative in designing the theory of change of where it is today. And a lot of what Rubab has talked about also focuses on all the different elements. So the baseline evaluation is really measuring the outcomes, the final outcomes, as well as the intermediate outcomes of this process. And those are the 4 boxes on the right, really looking at improving in goat health through preventive health care, increase in income. Women are empowered to make decisions, and Rubab gave wonderful examples of the various steps that they're taking in the field to enable that. And then overall, Jivika is employing the project's approach, which is also showing its fruits already. So this is some of the elements we are measuring through the outcome evaluation. So there are primary research questions that we will answer by the time we're done with the end line, really looking to see if the project had its intended outcomes in increasing income, in increasing the survival of the goats, and increasing women's empowerment through different measures. But at baseline, there are some very fundamental questions we're able to answer. So what is the current difference in mortality between Mesha and non-Mesha areas? The characteristics of the households of the women in which these goats are being reared? And is there any difference in women's empowerment? So at this point, I just want to take a moment to give you a quick overview of the study design. We have women we have interviewed in Mesha areas, which are the 4 blocks of Muzzaffarpur. We have gone primarily to self-help group households, or where women are, there is at least one member who is the primary goat rearer and is a self-help group member. But we've also gone to women who are goat rearers but not in self-help groups at this point, to test and see whether over time, when Project Mesha and the Pashu Sakhis become important and their influence grows, do these women join the self-help groups to have better linkages with markets, which is an intended direction of engaging through self-help groups. And then in the non-Mesha area, we've gone to another district and done a similar survey where we've identified women who are self-help group members and primary goat rearers, and their counterparts, women who are primary goat rearers, but they're not yet members of self-help groups. So I want to begin backwards by telling you what the key takeaways are, and then we'll go over the evidence that gets us to this point. So one of the key takeaways are that goat morbidity and mortality is slightly higher in the Mesha area versus the non-Mesha area. And one of the reasons is the herd size is larger in the Mesha areas. And goat morbidity, mortality is higher there. So there's also lower vaccination rates in the non-Mesha areas. So we think that the Pashu Sakhis have a very vital role to play going forward. Loan taking for goat and cattle rearing is low. So we'll look at loan taking patterns, formal, informal, and purposes. And overall, 60% of women across the board have taken a loan, and very little of it is really for goat rearing related entrepreneurial activities. So they can utilize those loans through formal mechanisms. Goat rearing supports income generation. So we see that household income is much higher when goat herd sizes are higher, and when women have learned how to negotiate, or they say that they're negotiating the sale of those goats with the people who come to buy them. So currently about 40% of the women are negotiating the sale of goats, and that could definitely be increased with the efforts of the program. And individual empowerment is low across all women. So we'll go over some of the indicators and measures of how we're looking at empowerment. But overall, we're looking at their ability to control assets, to make decisions, to use the income that they're earning from the goat rearing, and also to make decisions of when they can sell that. So overall, they're less empowered. Decision making, freedom and mobility, which would affect their ability to access markets and their access to productive capital, which can be used for these kind of entrepreneurial activities, is extremely low. And so 40% of women are achieving minimum empowerment overall, and we'll describe what that is further down. And the major contributors are really around production, so they don't have the ability to make decisions around productive capital, and they're not engaged in producer groups and self-help groups and other formal groups where they can utilize, where they can learn more about these kind of approaches, as well as utilize the formal lending mechanisms that exist through the groups. So just quickly to give you an overview of the sample, the top numbers 5478 and 2218 are the samples that we've used to list. So 5,478 households, goat-rearing households in the Mesha area, and about 2,200 households in the non-Mesha area, are where we get our sample for goat morbidity and mortality, and where we capture goat population. And in overall, about 590 homes we've conducted across self-help groups and non-self-help group houses in the Mesha area, and about over 500 homes in the non-Mesha area. So overall, the characteristics of the goat rearers, the women's ages are similar, 35 to 40 years old, also something that the formative evaluation found. They're earning around 1,000 rupees on average per month. There's slight variation between the groups. So just quickly to tell you the colors, the dark green is the self-help group women in the Mesha areas, and the light green is the non-self-help group women in the Mesha areas. And the dark blue is the self-help group women in the non-Mesha areas, and the light blue is the non-self-help group women in the non-Mesha areas. And then we can also see that about 9% of households are Muslim compared to 14%, so the religion on that side. And then in the non-Mesha areas, the proportion is 5% and 27%. Scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. So some of the analysis I'm presenting up there is not in the slides here, comprise of 45% of SHG households and 23% of non-SHG households, and compared to the non-Mesha areas. So goat mortality. So overall, goat mortality is higher in the Mesha area. So this box here is looking at average number of goats in the household per year. More goats, 4.5 goats on average in the Mesha area compared to 3.5 goats in the non-Mesha area. And as a result, the mortality is also higher. This is looking at actual number of goats. So 5,500, so about 8,000 households average at 16,698 goats overall across these houses, because each house is about 3.5 to 4.5 goats. Goat mortality, if you look at the dark green bar, it's higher in the Mesha area as compared to the non-Mesha area. When we look at goat morbidity, herd size as well as goat morbidity is higher in the Mesha area. So herd size 3.2 versus 2.8, and average number of goats falling sick is 1.6 versus 1.3. And when we look at goat morbidity who've fallen sick in the last 6 months or are currently sick, goats in the Mesha area definitely more sick at this point as compared to the non-Mesha area. And a large reason of this is really the herd size, because we're looking at more goats in the Mesha area. Vaccination coverage and deworming. So I'm not sure how the colors are coming through, but overall, if you see, the higher proportion of goats have been dewormed in the Mesha area than the non-Mesha areas. And if you look at the goat vaccination, you'll see that it's lower in the Mesha area. And overall goat vaccination and deworming is higher in the SHG arm, which are the darker colors, and sometimes they don't appear at all as having been vaccinated in the non-SHG areas. So this was the story of the goats. We'll quickly look at loan-taking behaviors across the Mesha and the non-Mesha area. So across the sample, 57% of women have taken loans in the last year. And these are the sources of loans. We're primarily speaking to self-help group members, so a lot of the places where they're taking loans is self-help groups, a small proportion from banks, and then a small proportion from informal sources. When we look at the reasons why they're taking loans out, you'll see an average of between 6 to 23% are taking loan to expand businesses. And when we try and understand what kinds of businesses, we see that about 30 to 50% are taking it for agriculture or farm-related activities, and about 13 to 29 only for goat and cattle rearing. And those are the pie charts to the right. When we look at the non-Mesha areas, we actually see relatively similar patterns. Source of loaning, 53% of women, slightly less, are taking loans have taken a loan. And again, most of it is through self-help groups. The proportions that are taking out loan is less for businesses, 6 to 19%. And the reasons why they take out loan, again, 0 to 43% for goat and cattle rearing. So a huge variation in this sample. Now we'll move over to women's empowerment status and some of the questions, just showing you some of the results from the baseline value. So here is really, we asked a series of questions around decision making around their own health, the health of their children, livelihood generation and access to credit. Overall, everything is very low. So they have very little decision-making power around a lot of things. So less than a third of them have their own decision around health and livelihood, and less than a fifth of them are making decisions around borrowing money from any source. When we look at mobility, again, we ask a series of questions. Where all do you have permission? Where all can you go on your own? Large proportion you'll see participating in group meetings and attending VHND and immunization camps. But almost anything else for any other activity, it's extremely low. So I won't go into too much detail around this. The next one, really, we looked at financial empowerment. So really here looking at whether they have decisions to make, whether they are able to make their own decisions, whether they're engaged in household decision making, are they able to do savings, are they operating a bank account? So again, the questions around operating savings and having a bank account is very high in this population because you're looking at women in self-help groups, but then having control over any of the other decisions, economic decisions, is low. So when we looked at a composite score looking at women's empowerment, we see that overall the empowerment scores are relatively similar across the two arms of the study. It's my last slide. And around 40% of women only are actually achieving the minimum empowerment score. So the empowerment score is really a combination of the indicators I showed you, but a lot more within it, and really looks at production, which is decisions around agricultural production, and sold and joint decision making around assets and farming. Resources, so the resources box looks at ownership and access to productive resources like livestock, agriculture. Income really concerns around their decision making to use income and expenditure, and leadership is really around their leadership in the community. So if you look at it, production and leadership both are really the contributing factor for disempowerment. And again, the project has a huge, a great opportunity to actually address that. Production through actually owning the assets, the goats, and leadership through engaging through self-help groups. So this is an overview of the baseline evaluation. Over time, we intend to look at how the project has really focused on each of these elements that they defined within their theory of change, and how specific elements have changed over time. We would like to see that a lot of the reasons for the actual interventions in the program affected goat morbidity and mortality, eventually increasing women's ability to gain income and sell goats at less times of stress, and more be able to negotiate the sale of those goats, and learn in the process and become more empowered to be able to do these kinds of entrepreneurial activities. So good luck to the project.